Good afternoon, everyone. The Sacramento City Council will please come to order. Would the clerk please call the roll to establish an official quorum?
Thank you. Councilmember Kaplan. Here. Councilmember Laloy. Here. Councilmember Talamantes. Here. Councilmember Valenzuela.
Here.
Councilmember Maple.
Here.
Vice Mayor Guerra.
Here.
Councilmember Jennings.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Vang.
Yes.
And Mayor Steinberg.
Here. Yes. Here.
Here.
Yes.
Here and here.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Councilmember Laloy, would you please lead us in the land acknowledgement and the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you.
The Nyesan people, the Sardin Maidu, Valley and Plains Miwok, Patwin, Winton peoples, and people of the Wilton Rancheria, Sacramento's only federally recognized tribe. May we acknowledge and honor the native people who came before us and still walk beside us today on these ancestral land by choosing to gather together today in the active practice of acknowledgement and appreciation for Sacramento's indigenous people's history, contribution, and lives. Thank you.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Members, a point of privilege, if I might. I did this at the beginning of the Council's Racial Equity Committee today, but today we are thinking with big hearts and with great sorrow about the victims of the shootings, the killings in Monterey Park and in Half Moon Bay. And our hearts especially go out to the AAPI communities in those cities, but throughout California and in our own beloved Sacramento, because people are suffering, and we are all suffering together. You know, these crimes may or may not be officially called hate crimes, but they were undoubtedly crimes of hate. And it speaks to so many issues, obviously, the proliferation of these weapons of mass destruction, which is getting a lot of attention. I don't know what changes around the country, but it's certainly the topic that must be discussed. But as importantly, the continued work that we all have to do to end discrimination of all kinds, because it doesn't matter who the perpetrators were. At the root of all this, people were targeted because of who they were. And so to all of the people in our community who are fearful, who are sad, we're all sad. Let us just say, as a city council and as a city, that you are not alone. We are with you in solidarity, and God bless the victims and their families. It's unspeakable, but may we stick together. We need to stick together now like never before. Thank you. Appreciate that, members. We do have one item today, and this is a workshop, and I know members of the public say, well, you know, why are you spending so much time talking about council rules and procedures? Because how we govern ourselves really makes a difference when it comes to the results that we bring to and for the community. And so a lot of discussions in the community, but within the city here, about how we might change our rules of procedures, especially as it relates to how an idea might go from the community to the council member to the city council, and whether or not there might not be better ways to do that. And so under the leadership of the city clerk, with the leadership of the city attorney as well, together with my office, Vice Mayor Guerra, we bring forward a proposal here, an idea. And by the way, this is not the 10 Commandments, as they say. It's only intended as as an idea, and a provocative idea that we really want you to respond to. But if I might just give a little context, and I can turn over to the clerk for more context, because this is what's important. Okay, here's the problem. We have divided centers of power under the city charter. That's the way that it is. And so when any member or any stakeholder in the community or individual in the community wants to get an idea before the full city council, let's just say that it's sort of every person for themselves. There isn't a regularized process, really. Under the city charter, the mayor and the city manager can put something directly on the agenda. And no matter what we do here, that doesn't change because that's the city charter. But then there's the question, okay, should an issue, Ordinance A or Initiative B, go before a committee of the city council? Must it go before a committee of the city council? What if the majority of the members of the city council, and we have even numbered committees, vote to approve it, or more significantly, disapprove it, or what if it's an even vote? And because what happens now is that members try to work with the manager and or the mayor to get something on the agenda. That's okay. But then where the staff gets really in a tough place is when there are dozens of ideas being brought forward, they're not quite sure what to prioritize. And it's a significant workload issue for the city manager and his team, and sometimes for the city attorney and her team. And so we developed this log, the famous log, where an idea goes on the council log, and then we vote as a body regularly whether or not to let something off the log, i.e. whether or not to authorize the staff to prioritize in terms of workload. So it sounds good in theory, but the problem is that the general instinct is just to say yes, right? Because let it be heard, which then doesn't help the staff in terms of their prioritization workload problem. But the other problem, and this gets to me, is that a lot of things sit on the log for a long, long time without any committee action or without anybody from the council looking at it. I want to give you a couple of examples, thanks to the city clerk's homework here. Big issue, big racial equity issue about the state of the city's recreation fields, okay? And a report requested by former member Chenier asking to incorporate the interim equity analysis around deferred maintenance or CIPs relating to parks. Been on the log for 588 days. Now, that's not anybody's fault. It's just we get to what we get to based upon who's sort of pushing the hardest. And maybe that's politics and the way that it is. But I think we could, not just for ourselves, but for future generations of city councils, organize ourselves a little bit more so that there's at least some vetting before the staff then undertakes all the hard work. But as importantly, for the members to take their time or not take their time on an issue which may not have significant support. So what we've proposed here is a committee structure. And a committee structure that says an idea gets referred by the manager and the mayor together. We'd be a team here in referring to the appropriate to the appropriate committee. The committee would hear it. If it were a 3-1 vote, it's a sign of at least tentative support. It goes to the council. If it's 2-2, it doesn't automatically go. It could go to the council then with a 2/3 vote of the city council, like taking something off the log, but with a 2/3 vote instead of a majority vote. And if it were 1-3 or 0-4, then the idea, cannot be brought forward in that form for another 12 months. So no system, especially among 9 members, is going to be perfect. But we thought we would put this out here as a discussion point and to hear your input and to see if we might then make a recommendation. No decision today, but to ask the city clerk to come back maybe with our consensus or as close to consensus as we might come and figure out our rules of procedure. Anybody want to add any introductory? Mindy, you want to add any
think you said it
introductory
well.
comments? Okay. Howard, you don't have to opine on this, but just maybe your view of the problem that
Sure.
we're trying to solve here.
I appreciate the overview, and I totally agree. We've had many conversations about this, and this log was born out of necessity for the reasons you described. We had many different ideas and issues brought up by this council for staff to go to look at and to spend resources and time and effort. And the log was a way to capture all of those so that there was a vote by a majority of this council to move forward on some of those things. Well, it's become cumbersome. The mayor brings up this one issue that's been on the log for 500 some odd days. It's really tough because it sits on the log until we can take some action with it. Part of it is that we're waiting for this council to adopt what this equity lens would look like. And so it has to be the priority of this council to develop that lens. Otherwise, things that are associated with it stay on the log for 518 days. But if we transition to a committee type structure, which is what the mayor is proposing, and it gets to a place where, it doesn't come out of committee unless it's 3-1 with this supermajority vote, I think that's great. I think one thing that's very critical for me and staff, and I won't speak for the other charter officers, is that when it goes to committee, the staff will not do any pre-work or prep work for the council member who wants this heard at committee. From my perspective, I think it really needs to be the committee decides whether we expend resources on that issue. At that point, that's when we could really dig in and say, okay, it's been vetted at committee, it's come to the council, we're going to start putting resources behind it so we don't have to do some of these things here. So I love the conversation, and I'm interested to see where everyone's at. I've had conversations with a few, and I get a sense for where everyone's at. But wherever we end up with refining the current law, going to this new structure, the point really is we need to streamline so that we can, leverage the limited resources we have in staff, and so that we can help you achieve the things you want to achieve. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, so why don't we start with the council on this one? Maybe we'll take public input, of course, but start with the vice mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I want to thank you and your team for taking the time to think through, our rules and procedures here. Thank you also to the city clerk for re-engaging in this conversation. In the past, generally, council rules come up at the beginning of the year. They're on the consent item. We vote them through, and then throughout the year, we kind of struggle sometimes when we have issues. Hence why mid-year we created this council log idea. And I'm glad that at least that the proposal that we're here to kind of discuss kind of does away with this general council log. And in my opinion, I just felt that that council log, yes, it did what you have mentioned, Mayor, where everything became priority because everybody wanted to just let everything forward. But there were, I think, a couple occasions where there were some items that I think were prejudiced beforehand without actually having the due diligence of getting all the information. And I think the committee structure and being able to go to the committee structure ensures that we also give every idea the benefit of that presentation, that and not have it have the politics engaged at the point of asking the question. So moving it to into the committee level where an idea can be discussed in a smaller venue, and it also gives the public much more time to have a conversation. What I've noticed, at least in my time on the council, has been that at the committee level, when a person from our city wants to come in and discuss an issue or bring something forward, they're not competing against 30 other items on the agenda. They can have a dialogue with the council and the staff and be able to flush out an idea in a better way. I also think that, to the city manager's concerns about, how we ensure that we focus staff priorities on there, is that it begins at least to give a direction of, okay, well, at least you have, a small segment of the council, not just one person, but a small segment of the council that feels that this warrants a conversation. I do think that the proposal to have a majority of those present at the committee is important because if we don't have if we don't have to have a deciding situation, then what's the purposes of committees? We'll just throw everything back at the council level again. Like, we need to have those conversations. And I think that, we're unlike maybe the city of LA that's got 19 members or whatnot. We're still a small enough council. We may not be the 5-member council of some of our neighboring cities, but we're still small enough council that we have the ability to stay within the Brown Act conversations and have conversations with committee members to be able to educate our committee members with the right information. The last piece, I think, is, this also puts the onus on each individual council member to do their due diligence in their ideas and not just throw out an idea, and without any kind of background or whatnot, and be able to present at least a framework so that other council members, whether it's a budget item, a policy item, or an item that's before, our P&P committee, can be discussed by other colleagues. I will say, looking at that one committee that I've served on in the past, and I just feel has not been as productive, has been the water committee. It was kind of done at a time when we were, the drought was very political. Happened to be an election year as well, and the water committee was like, let's create a water committee because it was the hot topic issue. Now, I do think that the conversation about whether utility rates or water rates are an important conversation, but frankly, I think that can be done at the budget committee, because it's a fiscal question. It's a question about resources. So that's my point of view. I felt that, at least at that time, we can keep the water committee. Most of the members want it, but I just feel that it was one of those that was a good idea, but didn't work out the way it should have. Now, maybe we can reform that better. Let me stop there, but I'll just say that I think that moving forward in the committee process also is going to help us, at least put priorities so that we can start moving those priorities with the city faster. And then having our chairs, really take the lead as well in working with their members of the committee to say, okay, let's really wrestle through this log and figure out how we want to move and prioritize things. And I look forward to working with the chairs on the committees I serve on to put those forward. So I'll leave it there. And then the last piece, I think, Mr. Mayor, that I'd like to throw out is, in the past we've had random budget or finance asks, and they've been done at the dais. And maybe one suggestion is that. That if there is going to be, say, a suggestion to fund or add an appropriation to an item, that our standing rules divert that to budget and audit, so that we don't start, in April and May and then June and then whatnot, start approving these small buckets that add up to a lot of money over the year. But at least that the budget committee can have a conversation versus in the heat of the moment funding a program or a project because all of a sudden there was a policy question. So I think being able to say that if the council does want to do that, then that it can be referred to the budget committee and at least have that versus a one-off appropriation of 100 or 200 grand or 300, and avoid those. So that's, I think, one thing that maybe on the standing thing, if there's an appropriation that's suggested, that it be at least reviewed once by the budget and audit committee, if it's not part of the fiscal year budget.
Right. That's a good, solid suggestion. Thank you. Good comments. Councilmember Valenzuela.
Thank you. I do want to really appreciate the city attorney and city clerk for putting this together. It is super helpful to structure what could have otherwise been a very broad and far-reaching conversation. So really appreciate, and I want to echo what the vice mayor just said about putting a little bit more work on us when we bring ideas forward. I like that we're saying provide some research, maybe look into what other cities have done, maybe talk to a few stakeholders before you just say, hey, let's do this thing. And even to create greater clarity with staff, because I know I put things on the log before that staff follows up and says, what did you mean by this? And so then we kind of have to go through this process of like, oh, this is what I meant. I do have a couple of of concerns, though, and well, not one, ideas, because this isn't a solid proposal, we're responding. One is that in the small budget, in the small box, we talk about exceptions, and at the bottom of that box, it talks about a matter that should receive commission input before going to committee. I really think that should be more standard practice. And yes, it will slow this down a little bit, but I don't know if you've all heard from your commissioners, I hear from my commissioners, hey, we aren't getting all the active transportation stuff that you all are looking at Active Transportation Commission. We're not getting all of the ADA-related stuff at the Disability Advisory Committee, and we'd like to provide that input. That's why they're there as volunteers, as residents, and that's why we appoint them to these different commissions, is to give us input. So I would really love, unless it's an urgent matter, as is noted here, if we could a little bit more institutionalize going to the commissions before we get to the committee, so that they can be that brainstorming space. They can really vet out all the ideas. It's the whole city's represented, and then when it gets to law and ledge or budget or whatever committee that is, there's a little bit more feedback from the community, and we're taking that to the next step. And maybe it's an iterative process, like at law and ledge with cannabis. I know we've sent something back to Planning Commission on zoning, and then we're going to get that back from Planning Commission. So it doesn't have to be a super linear process, but I do think that institutionally, like most matters we hear, probably could have gotten some more input from the commissions, and that would give them a really meaningful way to engage. So I'll put that on there. And then the second part is that I don't want us to arbitrarily change the vote threshold for making changes at council. And I'm going to say this in two folds. Our committees are less than a majority, and so I don't think that less than a majority of council should be able to kill something, right? You know, you only have 4 folks. That means the majority of the council members isn't getting a chance to weigh in. So we don't want to just arbitrarily say, now we're raising that vote threshold. Similarly, when something comes back, you know, we don't want to say now it takes a 2/3 vote, because we say that the golden rule here is you need 5 votes, right? Except for limited circumstances. So how do we make sure we honor that with some of this and create a process for reconsideration? So on this far right bucket where it says proposal does not receive clear majority or 2/2 vote, I think there should be a way for that to come back to the log and say, hey, do we want to consider this anyways? It's been heard at committee. I don't agree. I was the sponsor of this measure. I don't agree with the budget committee. I don't sit on the budget committee. I'd like to see if my colleagues would still like to hear this item. I think that's important, because I don't think that 4 members should get to override potentially 5 members on the rest of the dais who might agree with something. And similarly, I think raising the vote threshold for something to get out of committee to 3-1 essentially, because that is 75% of a 4-member committee. And so if we get a 2-2 vote on committee, the practice has been that that can go to council for a discussion. And so if we now say you have to get 2/3 vote to even have something heard, I think we're raising the bar beyond the fact where our charter and everything says, hey, majority vote passes ordinances, and that's how we rule. And so I think we're kind of de facto changing some of the thresholds in certain circumstances here. So I don't really like that. I do think that I personally would like to keep a 2-2 vote from committee, goes to the council, a 3-1 vote has a recommendation from that committee, and then maybe create a log process for reconsideration. Rick brings forward a really great idea. Law and Ledge says, no, we don't like it. And Rick says, well, I think I've got the votes on council. I want to see if we want to hear it anyways. I think there should be a clearer process for that, rather than it saying it just dies because that one committee said no, because, you know, it could be still a really good idea that would get majority vote approval. So that's kind of my bucket concern with this, is just for those 2 instances. But otherwise, I love the process. I love the additional requirement for proposals, and I think this could work really, really well.
You just hit at the absolute nub of the issue, which so I want to hear from everybody else, but then I want to engage a little bit, because I think you raise a really good and fair point, but there is another side to it. So I just want to dialogue a little bit about that.
As chair of Law and Ledge, which is ironic, because normally you'd think I'd be like, no, if it stops in my committee, it stops in my committee. But I don't think that's fair, right? Like, I think there could be something where, you know, you only get 1 vote on committee, and you have 4 other members on the rest of the council who would support that idea. And I think we should create a pathway for that. You know, it might be a limited pathway, but it should still be a pathway that exists.
Mayor, do you want to respond?
You want me to? Well, I want to make sure everyone has a chance to speak, and then I will, because it's Councilmember Valenzuela hit at I think the core of the issue, which, by the way, debated a lot in my head back and forth in doing this. So go ahead, Councilmember Maple.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just want to say, one, acknowledge that we have a lot of capital experience up here on the dais. That's one of the many benefits, and maybe also a challenge of being the capital city of the 4th largest economy in the world. And you know, many of my colleagues here have a lot of experience in that building, and I think that it makes a lot of sense that there be some similarities between those processes, because that process has been used for a long time for probably good reason. And I'm really supportive of the concept of making sure that we're being really thoughtful about the workload of staff. And, I know, I'm not, being new here, I'm not sure if this has happened before, but I can guess that, there might have been requests that members have made in the past that maybe only had their support, which then led to a lot of staff time and effort and work on something that probably wasn't supported by the larger body. So I see that as being a problem and something that we do need to solve. I just want to say that one of the challenges that I see is making sure that there's equity, right, for the members that have their ideas heard. I can't speak for anyone else, but for myself, I can see there being two major committees where most things are going to go through, and that's probably budget and law and legislation. Not to say that things won't go to other committees, but that's probably going to be the bulk of what happens. And I personally don't serve on either of those. And so I think to myself, is it going to be harder for someone like me to have, my ideas be thoroughly heard? Not that I think anyone would not have that happen, but making sure that we have some form of equity. And I don't know, I like some of the other suggestions that were made, but also maybe some way that the requester, whoever that may be, is involved in the process moving forward. That might be really difficult.
Which part of the process? Go ahead.
Well, the committee process, but that makes it hard because it's a Brown Act. Unless they're I'm not sure how that'll work. So that's my main concern, and I'm not sure how that gets resolved in this process, but I want to make sure that everybody has the same ability to have their ideas heard and go through and have an opportunity to have an idea that they have be heard before the council. So I'll just leave it at that, and I know we'll discuss it more.
Good. Thank you. Councilmember Jennings?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to support my colleague on the last point that she just made. I was trying to do a spreadsheet to see who was on law and ledge and who was on budget, just to make sure that everyone had an opportunity for their voice to be heard. And I didn't have time to finish it, but I didn't know that your voice would not be heard because you're not on either one. And I do think that would be an injustice. So I do want to make sure that everyone's voice has the opportunity to be heard in this new structure, which I support. But I have a few questions I just want to ask before I get into that. We talked about the one extreme example, and I'm sure there are more, of an item being on the log, council log, for over 500 days. Yes. Did we look at what the average time of an item being on the log was? And I don't think we really need to answer that question right now, but I do want us to think about that, because in this situation also that we're now going into, what do we anticipate the average amount of time for it to be on the log, on the new log per se? And how do we know that the process will improve because we've changed the way something gets on the log? And that's just a question that I have because I don't have the answers to it. So I'm glad that today is a workshop for us to be able to talk about this and be able to discuss this and then have some more answers as far as information that we don't have today.
Go ahead. Yeah, well, I was just going to say, Madam Clerk, we were just whispering. We don't have the data to do an average, but I only gave you one example. I've got Councilmember Guetta, Vice Mayor Guetta's request to look at the deferred maintenance backlog for council consideration, 595 days. There are a number of over 500s. There's one over 700. It just, there's a lot of them.
But my point is, the new system, how does that improve the number of days that it's on the log? Mm-hmm. That's the question.
I think the answer probably, is working with the committee chairs. That may be the next item here, to work with the committee chairs to make sure that there are regular order in terms of measures being heard by the committee within a reasonable period of time. I think that's not part of.
No, Mayor, if I can, when we were talking about it, I remind you that the commitment then from the mayor was that every item gets assigned to a committee.
Exactly.
And then it gets agendized. Because right now, it sits there in Neverland and never gets agendized. And so this process would have you assign it to a committee, and then it would be put on the agenda or a log or something so that it would be moved forward.
With time-specific request to the committee chair.
Which we could write in.
And maybe I'm in the details too deeply, but I do want to make sure that happens.
Yeah.
With time specific, so that we don't get into these.
That's right.
Excessive time spaces where you don't hear it again for 500 and something days.
That's right.
all right?
That would have to be part of this. You're right.
Okay, good.
And I just want to
Howard?
clarify too, that item on the backlog, and this is not a back and forth, but this is just, we're very judicious for those times we take something off the log because it's very important to this council. So when we talk about portions of it in the context, and I won't bring up all the other issues that came up at this council, but those come up, but they were not vetted fully because the number was insurmountable, really, on the backlog. So we left it on there in favor of having this council talk more broadly about within budget. And so it just kind of kept getting kicked down the road, which is another reason why, if it goes to committee, and if it's something that gets voted on at committee and it comes to this council, we could say, yes, we do want to hear this. We're not afraid of what that number looks like. Because in that instance, staff has talked about the backlog for well over a year in many different issues that have come up that are related to it. So I just want to be real clear that it's not for the lack of the staff trying to put something forward. But I mean, when we talk about the time on the log, there are a lot of issues with that too. And we talk about it every Wednesday at agenda review with all of your staff. And that's the opportunity for us to say, hey, if you do have questions about why it's sitting here, please ask us and we'll give you a briefing and then we could talk through it. But I think that, what the city attorney just mentioned in terms of looking at the current log and kind of assigning it to certain committees, that will get things moving, and then it'll be the committee to say, this is the time frame we want to hear back. And to the point of the vice mayor, we'll feel confident as staff that we'll have not a majority, obviously, of the council, but almost a majority of the council saying, we do want to hear this. We're not afraid to hear this. Good, bad, and ugly, we want to hear it. So, thank you, Mayor.
So would that come about in the form of meetings with the committee chairs in an effort to find out what goes on the agenda and when it goes on? Is that how that would happen, or we haven't thought through that process of?
Well, maybe I'll let the mayor talk about how those assignments will happen, but we're definitely going to review the log to figure out where they go.
The idea, you're talking about the existing items on the log or just going forward?
I'm talking about going forward.
Going forward, so the idea is that the manager and I would sit once a week, we'd get input from our colleagues, then refer based upon the subject matter of the idea to a committee. And based on your input here, because I actually hadn't thought about this, we would say or ask committee chair, Law and Ledge committee chair, please hear this before March 15th of this year, or whatever, working with the committee chair to make sure that that workload is balanced as well, so that we were adding, the time frame and the timeline to it. That would be the idea.
So there should be an aging list that it never gets to this point where we have them on there for that period of time. And that conversation would have happened during those meetings with the committee chairs, and I would imagine vice chairs as well, not just committee chairs, but committee chairs and vice chairs, to be able to have the conversation of what's on that should be pushed forward and what's been aging that has been sitting on there for long periods of time.
I believe that's going to be the case too, but the other thing you'll note of the current log, imperfect as it is, not only did we add new items from the previous meeting, we also reprioritize the priorities that this council votes on. So conceivably, this item, a couple items have been sitting on there, they're not ready to go, so they keep getting pushed down in favor of other priorities, which is the exact reason we're here. So.
Then the only other question I have is, I'm a person who strongly believes in best practices, and I'm just wondering what other city our size, our complexity, is currently using this committee process in the way that we're proposing to use it today. And we may be the best practice going forward.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. I don't know. I don't know, but how about this? We'll task ourselves with going back and looking at others. This was, Councilmember Maple sort of hit on it, I think. This was a little bit from a legislative lens, right, about how to use the committee process in just a more effective way. That's where it sort of came from. But we'll look at other cities.
Yeah. And I like the committee process. I like the conversation. I like where we're going. I like Councilmember Valenzuela's conversation about commissions to committees to the council. I like that because it encompasses a larger group of people. I just want to know, is it currently working somewhere, and what have they learned as a result of it being in practice for any length of time? So I'd be more than happy to take that on as a project.
Please.
To try to figure out whether or not this committee process is somewhere else, with a little bit of help from my friends.
Okay. No,
Okay.
appreciate you taking the lead on that.
No, I will.
Okay. Good. Councilmember Kaplan.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to everyone who put this together. Councilmember Maple is right. You know, I'm one of those that came from and trained through the legislative process, and still being an active and practicing attorney. You know, I like rules. I like procedures. I am one of those geeks that likes the nitty gritty and checking off that we've followed the rules. Couple things. I think it's really important that I want to restate that we make it very clear in regarding when staff time comes in and how we clarify that in the council rules and procedures. I think it's great that we as a council can still propose things from the dais, but then that puts the onus on us to put it in a written form so that it can then go to the mayor and the city manager as to what the next steps are. Who does it get referred to? And on that, one of the things I want that we make sure, however we end up here, that we go through and we look at, on our council rules and procedures book, the purposes, the authority of the purposes for each of the committees. One of them specifically, which thank you, Mayor, for appointing me chair of PPE, but I think we need to add a couple things as what you and I have discussed what the purpose of PPE is, to make sure that that is amended and put in authority for PPE, because it dovetails very nicely into what you were talking about, Councilmember Valenzuela, with our boards and commissions. Like, they deserve to have their voice heard, and that we need to clarify what is it and how do we have their voice heard? What is that process? Because I think those that we appoint want to do good, want to do the research, want to give input, and having that clarity, which will more so be set up through PPE, come through so that when Mr. Mayor, you and the city manager are sitting down and looking through things, you know, okay, this commission is looking at this subject matter. It needs to go to them first before it hits either a budget or law and ledge as we start through that process, because we talk about transparency and we talk about giving voice, and our boards and commissions are a way to do that. I think having this clarified will really help. On the, and I also think we need to make sure that, so that, you know, there is equity, because we have standing subcommittees, correct me if I'm wrong, Madam City Attorney, it's subject to the Brown Act, but we're noticed. So if you have something you're proposing, I think it should be the council member who presents that proposal to the committee, not staff, but
Yeah, you can't do that.
you can't do that?
You are really raising an important point here that I'm glad you raised, which is this is the conundrum, and Katie Maple,
Yeah.
so what if Councilmember Maple has an idea before the Law and Ledge Committee? She's like constant Brown Act prohibited from presenting her own proposal? There's got,
Well, then,
Well, can she partner then, is it having to partner with somebody on Law and Ledge that presents that on her behalf?
that's weird. I mean, it's
Eric, I was gonna use our example.
that's how I feel.
So here's an example, well, can I speak? Sorry, I wasn't
Yes,
on
you
line.
may.
Just to address
There you
that.
go.
On
Just
this,
to-
because
just on this.
you just hit a.
So next week, the language access audit is coming to council. Hi, Jorge. And there are different directions that we may take, right? This is public anyways, but I've been working on a language access ordinance. I'm not on Law and Ledge, but I was hoping to bring that forth to the full council, and then we're probably going to direct it to Law and Ledge. So that's a way to do it as well. Now it's out of my hands, and keep my fingers crossed that the community will be watching and going through Law and Ledge and making their voice heard through Law and Ledge about the policy, right? That's an option. I mean, that's kind of like this chart.
I think that's a smart exception, that if you don't serve on a committee and have a proposal that's within the subject matter of the committee, is requesting and at least getting a majority vote of the city council to be referred to committee, so it be considered, or like, then what's the process? Then what's the process? Because then Councilmember Vang can't go to the committee and say, please vote on my ordinance. But how does that get considered? Because I don't know, I've done some research, as Councilmember Jennings suggested, for best practices, and didn't find anything.
I think the vice mayor might have an answer to this conundrum.
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
In the legislative side, for example, a senator can only present in the Senate, and an assembly member can only present in the assembly. But a bill must be heard by both houses and presented by somebody. That's why you have floor managers. And so in this case, we could do that. We could have a process where, and the philosophy stands. Every bill must be heard on each floor, right? And a floor manager is what it is. So, and frankly, I also feel like if you can't get someone to floor manage your bill or your proposal, I mean, it means you can't get a second. So it sends a signal. So that may be one concept. I'm not going to say it's a good idea or a bad idea because I'm kind of thinking through it right now, but it's not a bad idea because then it also gets another council member to start digging into your policy proposal as well. So that when you do present something, I've found that on the council, when there's been 2 or 3 of us that worked on something, we've been able to at least respond to questions and issues better when we're on the dais. So that's one idea. But a clarifying question, maybe to our city attorneys here, is if a council member is noticed to present to a committee, why is that a prohibition of the Brown Act? Because the Brown Act says that if they're not a voting member of that committee, what's the prohibition in the Brown Act specifically that says that you cannot do that? Because what the Brown Act intends to do, at least in my understanding and the number of ethics courses we've taken, is to avoid this ex parte conversation that has a majority vote without the public viewing. But in a committee, when a council member is proposing, the committee is viewing the conversation. So what is the legal restriction to that?
5. And you have a majority of the council discussing an item, and it's not a noticed council meeting. That's the issue. You could, I have offered this before, you could notice it as a joint city council and committee meeting, and then any number of council members would be able to speak on the issue, but it's a little bit of redundancy. I think we did for budget and audit one time, but that's the issue. It's you've got a majority of the council members discussing an item within the jurisdiction of the city, and so it requires to be noticed as a city council meeting.
And I tried tweener on that, which is, so what if we noticed every committee formally as a joint council committee meeting? However, only the committee members could vote.
We'll look at that, Mayor, because we used some version of that when I was Modesto's city attorney. We did some version of that exactly.
That would then solve it. You'd have you have the noticing issue. The member who's not on the committee could present. Other members could participate, although we're all busy people, right? Not everyone's going to participate in every.
But we just have to clarify who's the voting authority.
Votes are members of the committee.
I'm committing to look at that.
Okay.
Great.
Yay, I think we found like a great potential tweener.
Okay.
So there's several options of, I think, that we all need to discuss of, one, do we want to have kind of like the floor manager sponsor process, that if you're going to bring something to budget or law and ledge, somebody who sits on that committee is your floor manager that presents that, or looking at whether we can bifurcate it, like you said, of opening it up a joint city council subcommittee, but clarify who's voting, and then everybody can show up. Because I think it's for purposes of transparency that, I think I'm probably leaning towards a joint city, council, posting, so that a council member can present their own agenda idea. And then so I believe every voice should be heard, but I think what I'm also hearing is that there's 9 of us, and no one person should have the authority to dictate what the rest of the council does because we operate by majority. So I am open to looking at that if something in committee receives a 2-2 vote, that it comes to council and the council first has to take a vote, and by a majority is this item to come later to city council instead of a 2/3 vote, because that keeps with a majority. So if something got a 2-2 in committee and comes up and only gets 4 votes, it doesn't come before council, and it still is on that 12-month reconsideration. But I am supportive of when something gets potentially a 1-3 in committee, that it doesn't move to the next level. We've all got to find a way to work together. And just as Councilmember Guerra talked about, you should, when you're going to the opposite side of the house, you got to find somebody. And I remember doing that as a staff member, going who was going to chair a boss's bill on the floor. And so, I'd like to think that we as a council can figure out a way to bridge and get a 2-2 so that it can come before. But if something does get a 1-3 vote or a 1-2 vote, that it is stopped there and not allowed for reconsideration for 12 months. I am supportive of that process, because what I think it forces us to do is find ways to work together. If you know you need a 2-2, we are a family in all its glory. We have got to find ways and positive ways of working together. And a 2-2 kind of forces us to get there. If you know you need a 2-2, it causes us to, if you get out of your shell and find a way to get there. So that's why I'm supportive of the 2-2 and then majority. But if something gets a 1-3 or a 1-2, bad on me if I only got 1 vote. That was me not reaching and trying to find a friend to be supportive. But I really appreciate staff working on this. I am a creature of habit on process and procedure. And so, Councilmember Jennings, I'll happily join you in some of that research, because that's my favorite stuff to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Talamantes.
Okay, so I have a few asks. My first one is for exceptions, if we could still maintain a log. City manager, I know you get a million requests for a million things, you and Blaney and Jorge and city clerk. So if we could still maintain a log for those miscellaneous ones, that would be great. And I also want to see for the proposal concludes with, unless council on 2/3 vote agrees to hear the matter. I don't think it should be 2/3. I think it should be 5 votes. I think 5 votes is enough on this council. And I wanted clarification just on committee referrals. I mean, I know we're discussing this, and I haven't been at the Capitol, so I'm not familiar with some of the language that we're discussing, but I have been at City Council, and I have seen the council follow-up log. And to staff's credit, especially Amy Williams, there has been a lot of things that have been taken off, because staff does get back to the council offices, and it's a council office's chief of staff's and team to follow up and to see where it is in the process. So that log only has some outstanding items, but I'm sure that there's hundreds that Amy Williams and city staff have already taken care of for us. So as we move forward, to me, maintaining the current log, at least for asks of Howard, is important to me. And then having a 5 vote is important to me, just because 2-2 is fine coming to council. I don't think having a 2/3 vote and then coming back is necessary. I think it's going to create a more lengthy process.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Laloe, let's just hear from who we haven't heard from, and then we'll go back. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So I'm hearing all my colleagues, but I do have some questions. The 1-3 vote, I fully understand where you're going, Councilmember Kaplan, but still, even a 1-3 vote, it's if I bring up something that's going to law and ledge, it's exclusively affecting a D2. And if my colleagues are not very familiar with that district, and if it's a 1-3 vote, well, is it really fair to a district that, and I'm going to use Law and Ledge as an example, no offense, is it fair to that district that a 1-3 vote and it just got killed on Law and Ledge, and now it's not coming out to the council, so we can all discuss it? So I'm a little bit concerned about a 1-3 vote, then it's just killed, push it aside. And also, if there is a policy that is put forward, let's say by me, to that Law and Ledge is reviewing, kind of going back to where Vice Mayor Guerra was alluding to, if I'm just representing it to the body of the Law and Ledge, let's say, without Q&A, just presenting why this is important, and I walk out, does that still violate Brown Act?
Yes.
Unless the meeting is duly constituted as a committee and a full city council meeting. Maybe.
It depends. It depends.
Maybe. Right, we're going to get the answer to that question. We're trying to figure out if there's a way.
Because one thing that Mayor Pro Tem Vang just also discussed was to kind of bring it to the city council and then direct it back, which I kind of like the sound of it, but does that increase the timeline of how fast we can implement things? 'Cause that's my other concern. You know, even with, and I hate to pick on Law and Ledge, because, no.
You can
But-
pick on
but-
PPE.
But, yeah, Water Committee is a
The
perfect
Water
example,
Committee.
right? You know, there are things that we need, you know, a little bit of a faster paced decision to be made so it can come to council to vote, but all of a sudden, it's kind of just sits on the logs at Law and Ledge, and, you know, a year and a half goes by, we're still waiting because even our own residents don't know what we're doing. And, you know, cannabis is a perfect example. You know, we still have a lot of individuals out there that don't know what the guidelines are. And I know this has been on the logs of Law and Ledge for about, well, 2 years, considering 2+ years since I've been here. So those are my concerns. I think going to these committees, giving them a timeline that, hey, we need this back by, let's say, 60 days, not 180 days, not 365 days, just a shorter time so it can come back to council so we can make decisions and become more efficient on passing policies to give better directions to our residents of what they have to do and what they can do. That would be great. That's my 2 cents on this. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Everyone has spoken at least one time. Vice Mayor, were you back on? Yeah. Vice Mayor, then Councilmember Valenzuela, Councilmember Maple, and then I've got a few things go.
So a couple thoughts, you know, from the conversation here about what do you do when something dies and it's in the purgatory per se, right? For example, when a bill gets vetoed, it's actually not dead. It actually goes into the unfinished daily file of whatever house it was in. So we could have a unfinished business of whatever died in committee. So I think that's important. And I respect the concern about the 2/3 vote and the majority vote of rehearing something. So I think I could probably live with moving it back to moving away from a 2/3 vote to a majority vote. You know, but bear in mind what you're also saying is you're overriding a committee or whatnot, or a committee chair. So, but that's fine. I guess the point, if the spirit is that 5 votes is what speaks for a council, then and that's the spirit of it, then 5 votes, you know, is moving something forward. Now the 2/3 concept, you know, and also maintaining a 3-vote concept is all, I mean, at least the 3-vote concept sticks to the majority rule. A majority of the body has said, we believe, and the committee says we believe that this should move forward and not. Herein lies why it's difficult and why it's a little challenging is that, you know, the fear of losing something, you know, and frankly, you know, I may be eating my words later on in the year if it goes to a 3-1. But the reality is that if we're trying to address the challenge that the city manager cannot bring to council all of the things we've asked at an appropriate amount of time because of the staff resources, then that requires us to make some tough decisions here. And that means that at the committee level, it requires us as committee individual council members to make tough decisions, which means it's going to require us to have a better working relationship about the issues we're working on that are coming to council that we're proposing. So so to me, I always felt that, what I believe it should be a majority of those present, because sometimes we may not have 3 council members in a committee. It's very often that some of us get pulled onto other JPAs or things happen, but at least the concept of majority in the decision-making process is a signal that something can move forward. Now, so that's my only concept. My only thing to leave on the table is to say that if we really want to address the issue of workload, then that means we have to make some early and difficult decisions about whether something moves forward. I agree with the fact of having something in, what's the backstop in case you have a runaway committee, right? If that wretched water committee goes and says, we're not letting anything out, then the council needs an ability to be able to bring that item back from the water committee, right? Bring it back to life. So I think the 5 vote would be appropriate. Here's what I would say. What I would hate is that the vote to bring something back becomes the debate itself, because then therein lies the problem, right? So I would say that if there's an unfinished business log where things go in purgatory, then you do like in, I know we use Rosenberg's Rules of Order, but in Robert's Rules of Order, the move to a previous question is a non-debatable motion. It's either a yes or no, should this be brought back or not? And then that way we don't get into long council meetings on the question of whether we should discuss the question. So I would say that if we do have an unfinished business log, it should be, will it be heard at the council or not? And it be in our rules that it is a non-debatable item.
That's right. That'll make things very efficient. Okay.
But I still stand firm that the majority rule policy, even in the committee structure, is
I understand. I think we are moving towards the 2-2 coming to the council with that, but with no debatable motion, just heard or not heard.
It's not subject to debate.
Not subject to debate. Okay, let's keep going here. Councilmember Valenzuela, Maple, Talamantes.
Yeah, I am another legislative staff alumni here, and it's important to note that the legislature is actually not subject to Brown Act, right? They exempt themselves from the Brown Act, so there's comparisons and then there's not comparisons. It's a lot easier to do a lot of things over there because we could just walk into someone's office and say, hey, what do you think? But I appreciate where we're going. I think my general core issue is that I don't think a minority of the council should be able to stop something that a majority of the council might want to consider and vote on, right? Like that's sort of like a foundational principle of like 4 of us, 3 of us, 2 of us should not be able to kill anything that the other members of the council might be like, yeah. I don't think that there's a problem with the 2-2 motion items coming from committees. We've never had, like the issues have been the log items, right? It hasn't been an issue that went through law and ledge and only got 2 votes. Those have been, we've heard it, we've discussed it, we debate it. We're not having an issue with items that are only getting 2 votes at committees. So I don't think we should change that. I mean, that should still come to council like it's been coming because it hasn't been a problem. I think the question that we're narrowing in on is what happens to those items that don't get any votes at committee or only get 1 vote at committee, but that other members on this council may say yes. And so I support what the vice mayor is saying of it should be a non-debatable motion. It should be up and down. Do we want to hear this or not? And then we decide to move forward, because that's where we've been getting into the mess with the log is, as you've noted very appropriately, the past vice mayors, like this is becoming a quasi-hearing every time because now we're debating the merits of the item when really the question is, do we even want to agendize this item? And then that's where, we can have that discussion. And the council members provided a summary and they have their proposal. And so we're able to read what they're trying to do and say, we think this is worth a discussion. So I just want to make super clear that I don't think we should change the committee recommendation process. The 3-2, the 3-1, 2-2, it's working. I don't think that's where our issues aren't coming
What about
from
the
committees.
1-3?
The 1-3 for reconsideration, that's what I just mentioned, is going to what I support what the vice mayor is saying in terms of log, right? We have a log of items that died at committee, and Councilmember Jennings can say, I just don't think that's fair. The budget committee didn't consider that. I want to bring it up, and up or down, do we hear it, right? I think that makes a lot of sense. So I guess what I'm narrowing in on, though, is the 2-2, because I think we're adding an additional layer of process here that isn't necessary, because I haven't seen any item come from Law and Ledge or Budget and Audit on a 2 vote that's been the super controversial items. That it's been the log items where it's like someone's just throwing something out there and we're debating on that. So that's where my problem is, because I think we're layering, because it's not majority vote at that point, it's 75% to get the 3 votes on a 4-person committee, right? And so I don't want us to, that's a lot, that's a big threshold at a committee level when you might have 2, 3, 4 members who aren't on that committee who are like, I actually really like this proposal and I'd like to be able to vote on it. And now we're just making it more complicated. So yeah.
So are you basically proposing that anything that gets a 2-2 or a 1 whatever go through the unfinished
No,
business
I'm
model?
saying that if you get 3-1, we want to move this forward, or a 2-2 split, that it comes to council, because that's our current practice. And so with its 2-2, it comes without a recommendation. When it's 3-1 in support, it comes with a recommendation. But it comes to council and it's an agendized item and we consider it like we would any other item. What this proposal is doing is it's adding an additional, do we want to consider it vote for 2-2 items? And I don't think that's necessary, because past practice hasn't determined those items to be the problem. The problem is the items that are getting added on the log, that don't have a committee process, that aren't going through commissions, that we're just trying to throw into the hopper, and that everybody says, wait, I don't like that. So I think we're changing something that isn't broken when it comes to the committee process. And I feel pretty strongly about this because, like I said, my foundational principle is I don't think a minority of the council should be able to kill something that a majority of the council might like
I'm
to
pretty
hear.
close. Can I? I'm pretty close. Were you done?
I just,
No?
well,
Go ahead.
one more thing that I say, because I just want to make sure, one of the things I liked about the log was when we think about the legislature, it's really easy to track proposals at the legislature, right? It's really easy for me, not if you know how, right? Not for everybody, but it's really easy for me to log onto a website and say, here's all the bills that are at Education Committee today. Here's all the bills that are at Appropriations Committee. Like, you can see where everything is in the process. And so the log is an imperfect way to do that and to kind of tell the public, hey, this is what we're working on. But I don't want to totally lose that. And I'd like for us to think about, like in agenda review, our staff hears what's coming in the next week or two. I like that because it gives the public a little bit more of a chance to prepare than just seeing something on an agenda on Thursday and being like, oh no, I have really strong opinions about that thing in D2 and now I've got to run around and rally. So I'm just putting that in the hopper for a separate conversation. How do we track what we're working on so the public can see and knows where to weigh in? Oh, this is going to active transportation. Oh, Parks is considering this thing. Oh, it came from, the council member Talamontes. I have an interest in that. I'm going to go to the Parks Commission and follow this through the process. So I'll add that. But no, my big thing, Mayor, is I don't think 2-2 vote from committee. I think we're adding in too much process here, and I don't want us to get stuck again on that.
So, man, I think you make a really good argument. I really taken that in and want to think about it. But then you said something else because you went a step further. You said if it's 1-3, that it should automatically come to the council for a.
No, you're confusing.
Oh.
1-3 in support. So our current practice is you have right here, if you get 3 votes in support at committee, it comes to council with a
Correct.
recommendation.
Okay, what if it's
Yes.
1-3 against?
Then it goes on to purgatory, as the vice mayor said, and we kind of find another less religious name for it, but it goes into purgatory, like he said, and we can call it forward for an up-down vote on whether we want to
That's my
consider it.
clarification, too.
That's the part that was another step. So in other words.
Well, I'm just repeating what the vice mayor
I
said.
thought what the vice mayor was saying is if it's 2-2, if it's 2-2, it goes for the non-debatable up or down. You're extending it to the 1-3.
Yes, I guess then I am, because I don't think the 2-2 is broken, and I don't like the fact
Well,
that
the
we have to
2-2,
go
let's say,
through.
the
Yeah.
2-2 may not be broken, right? That's
Yeah.
right, you had me
Okay.
close there.
Okay.
It was the 1-3, where then it gets.
Like, for reconsideration, I can say, hey, I think I have 3 or 4 votes on this council, even though it wasn't on the committee, and I want us to vote up or down if we want to hear it, and if those votes do come through, then we hear it.
That weakens the committee, but then that weakens the committee process. But that's.
But I do
get-
have a clarifying question on that piece. Are you saying that if it fails at committee 1-3, that it will be heard or it can be heard?
It can be heard.
It can be.
At
So
re-
the
at
sponsor
request
can
of the
say,
sponsor.
hey, I put this forward and it died in committee, and I think that I have the votes, so I want to vote up, down if we consider it or not. I think it's just my foundational principle, Mayor, is that 3-4 members of this council shouldn't be able to kill something that the majority of the council may support. That's my foundational principle.
Okay. No, I mean, it's all clear, even if we're not
There's mud.
quite clear as mud. But and I'll respond to it in a minute, because
My comments will be really brief.
go. Yeah.
I actually had a question about what we just talked about. I just want to make sure that
Yes, so what, I can,
The up and down vote, that's the full council? I just want to make sure I'm getting
Yes,
clarity on
that's
that.
the full
Okay,
council.
that's all
Yeah.
okay. To reaffirm if,
and what we're debating is
Okay.
under what circumstances
yeah.
I'm going to
should that be
summarize
invoked?
my proposal
Got it.
too. So it's your council, again, committees, 4 people, 3-1 vote, 4-0 vote, it comes for positive, it comes to council, no questions asked, there's a recommendation. 2-2 split, we keep it like it is, it comes to council, there's just no recommendation. If it's a 3-1 vote against or a 4-0 vote against, that sponsoring council member can say, hey, I want to pull this forward for an up-down vote for consideration, I think I have the votes. If they don't, it dies, and that's it, it can't come back, but if it does get the votes, then we can hear it.
Okay. Councilmember Maple, go.
Okay. Well, yeah. Well, thank you, and I'll make this really brief. But I was actually inspired by something that Mayor Pro Tem Vang said, which is making sure that the community participation in the process at the committee level is a factor in this. And I'm just going to state the elephant in the room. People don't often show up to our committee meetings. They don't. And like the participation is lacking at many levels, and that's something I'm really passionate about, want to work on together with all of you, is how do we, democratize our government more and make sure that people want to participate in the process and it makes sense for them. But just in the context of this issue, making sure that we have a really robust way for people to interact and share their viewpoints, and that we're letting them know about what's coming to the committee so that they can participate. So that's just something that's important to me, and hopefully we can work on that together.
Yep. Okay, Councilmember Talamantes.
Okay, we started this because we want to protect staff time. So, city manager, at what point in this worksheet are we protecting staff time? I feel like we're making life more difficult right now.
I think that, as I stated in my opening comments here, to the extent that this council, the committees, adhere to the fact that the staff won't do any work until the full council has agreed that we want to move down this path with an initiative. I think that's where city attorney's at, city clerk's at, and the rest of the staff are at. Because the problem is that when we start chasing down some of these things on the log, and only to find out there's not support on the council, that's when we have these wasted resources. So I think that that's really key. Staff doesn't do any work until approved by the council.
Okay, thank you.
What's approved by the council?
That the
That's
council
why we
wants,
have the-
that the council wants to hear whatever initiative a sponsoring council
But if
member
it's a
wants to bring.
3-1 vote out of a committee or a 4-0 vote out of a committee, isn't that the indicia that it's got enough support to be able to?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's what we're.
that's what you're saying.
Councilmember Talamantes,
Okay.
can I add on to the city managers? I think that this whole process is designed to help funnel what you need us to work on in a way, though, that's not make sense, doesn't pull us apart into every I mean, I know everybody's focused on the city manager, but almost everything city manager's office takes on, our office takes on.
Right.
So
That's a really
it's-
good point. We
it's-
rely on the city
right,
attorney's
yeah.
office heavily,
So
especially for long range.
if it's going to get assigned to a committee and the committee talks about it, I'm a little bit different from the city manager because the lawyers are probably going to look at it a little bit, be able to advise you in real time. That might be unconstitutional rather than wait for you to vote, come to council, then tell you it's unconstitutional, rather tell you right then and there. So this helps us kind of funnel it. And if we're working with a committee that's there used to be an old process and some of my predecessors used that they called the 4-hour rule. Some of you remember that. 4-hour rule was that the city attorneys would not work on anything if it would take more than 4 hours to work on. And that was a little bit archaic and made no sense to me because we had some really sharp lawyers that could do a complex ordinance in 2 hours. So it didn't make any kind of sense. So what we're trying to do is make sure that if a committee thinks this is something we should work on, that's a good use of staff time. And it helps to spread it out. Plus, then we also know there's some buy-in to it. So that's why this structure is designed to help us, help you move things forward.
Yeah, I just wanted to recenter the conversation as to why we started this in the first place. I know we're getting caught up in little small stuff, so.
Let's go through the list, and happy to get back to you, Sean. Councilmember Kaplan. Councilmember Maple, Were you up again?
This is just from.
Before?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so
You gotta take your request. Oh, you gotta take me off.
I'm clearing everybody here. Okay, who is it? Councilmember Kaplan and then Councilmember Vang.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for bringing us back to the process.
Yes.
And thank you, Councilmember Talamontes, because my first question was, let's go back to, this is really about not even protecting staff time. I think what we've not talked about is capacity issues. Like, there is a balance that we need, and staff is not obligated to work 12 hours a day, even though they might. Because we have staff that really care and are here. So there is a level of, we have to hold ourselves accountable. So I just want to clarify a couple of things to see if we do, when this comes back, we have potential agreement that if something out of subcommittee comes with a 4-0 or a 3-1, that's basically saying staff is authorized to work on it, to present it to council. I'm hearing differences of where we are on a 2-2, but I think there is a potential middle ground so that minority positions still get a chance to be heard, that anything that is a 2-2 or 1-3 creates kind of like an appeal process where it comes before the council and not a debatable motion, but each item separately, does it get a majority of the council to hear? And if there is something that gets 5 votes, that then authorizes the staff to work on it and come back to council within 30 days? Or
Council or committee again?
Council or committee working with the city manager. But if something comes out of committee, 2-2 or 1-3, and they request unfinished business, I request reconsideration, basically is what it's called in the legislature. Reconsideration is coming before the full council, and if it gets a majority of the vote, then staff time comes in. I hear about the 2-2 and wanting to protect it, but I'm requesting like the reconsideration vote of the full council because I think that protects staff time. Because there could be something 2-2 or 1-3 that gets a majority of the council. So let's just have that vote, which then authorizes staff to work on that. And then I always come back to make sure, I hope that when we submit a proposal, we're also talking about how is this fitting in our future strategic direction for the city? Like, how does it fall under where we as a council are going to come together of what our mission, our vision, and our priorities are, so that we make sure we continuously bring back things as how are we working for the betterment of the city? My 2 cents.
Very good. Council member, Mayor Pro Tem Vang, excuse me. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor. Okay, sorry about that. We're going back and forth. Thanks, City Clerk. Just wanted to add my comment because I realize that I've been engaging in conversation about certain parts of the protocols and not giving my position on kind of where I stand overall on this. So just want to make sure I make that clear. So the first thing is I love this, and Mayor, City Clerk, and just thank you to staff that worked really hard to get us to this moment. This is really great. I love charts, and I think this is really easy for us to understand and for the community to understand. So I support the committee ideas. Where I stand on the 2-2 and 1-3, I'm okay with either or, whether it's 2-2 moving forward, whether it's 2-2 and 1-3 being considered for up and down vote. I understand that we're also considering staff time, but I do think that by the time we consider it, by the time the item is considered and it's either a 2-2 or a 1-3, the work has already been done to bring it back to the full council for an up and down vote. So I don't think it really makes a difference if the 2-2 and the 1-3 comes back to the council, because you're not doing extra work because the staff report's already done and you're just bringing it back to council for an up and down vote. So I don't really think that would matter. So I just wanted to.
Just for clarification, I think you mean the committee staff report.
The committee staff report, right.
Hearing and that would.
Right, because we're not doing any additional work. So even if you get a 2-2 or it's a 1-3, right, and it goes into that list, whatever list you want to call it, if it comes back to the council, if there's no additional there's no additional work. It's the same staff report. It's just being considered yes or no, right? And so I'm flexible. I'm okay with either or. Like, it's not a hill for me to die on. I'm flexible for either or. So just wanted to share my thoughts on that. And then the last part is I do support having some kind of log because I do think we really do need to request that balance. I also just want to mention the reason why having a log is really important, because sometimes it's not just ordinance or programs or research or initiative. There's just simple direction that needs to be done, and we need to make sure that we're monitoring that. Secondly, there are also items on the log that's been approved by the council that hasn't had any movement. And so for me, having that log is also a way for us to hold city staff accountable, and I think that's important to have the log. And so want to just also echo Councilmember Talamante's support for having a log, because I think that's important for us to just keep track as a city council. So those are my thoughts.
Okay. So just Councilmember Jennings, go ahead. Then I might sort of Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you, Sean. Were you still up?
Yeah, just,
Oh, sorry.
so going back to what you just indicated, is it safe to say that within the committees, even if it's a 1-3 vote, the staff has actually done the work to present to the committee?
Maybe.
So
Depends
they're
on
not
the
putting
idea.
the work.
No, that's not the case. So if it comes to committee, it's going to be the sponsoring council member to go to committee and say, hey, could I have please have your support to take this to the council? At that point, staff has not delved into the issue other than the city attorneys potentially looking at how viable it is legally. Right, exactly. So we haven't done any of the research. We don't have a full-blown staff report. That's what we're trying to guard against, so that we're not having to do that all the time.
So I just want to make sure I understand. So on a 3-1 vote, the staff hasn't really dove into an issue. A 3-1 vote kind of says, staff, we need more information because we're going to take this to council.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when the staff gets heavily involved. And on a 1-3 vote, again, the staff still is not involved. It's just the panel that decides it's a 1-3. It comes to the council, and if the council say yay, then that's when the staff gets activated. Well, all right.
So that's one idea. That's not. No, go ahead. Councilmember Jennings, go ahead.
I just wanted a couple things. I
Go
think
ahead.
I'm real clear on 3-1 vote,
Yeah.
and that moves forward. I think I'm clear on 2-2 vote, that because the committee has not been able to make a decision, yay or nay, that it will go to the full council for it to be voted up or down there.
As to whether or not it should be heard by the council.
Exactly.
Correct.
So,
Or you don't like that? No. I think Councilmember Valenzuela's idea, if I may summarize, 2-2 just goes to the city council without recommendation.
and I'm okay with that, because
Okay.
then at that point in
Okay.
time, it'll get voted up or down by the full city council. So I think we're in agreement. Maybe the verbiage is a little bit different. Where I'm in total disagreement is the 1-3, that if in fact you cannot get one other vote from a committee of 4, I think we're wasting a lot of people's time. And I don't believe that should move forward, right? Now, maybe there's a lifeline that you want to throw it at some point, some way, somehow. But to me, when you get voted down here on the council, we lose that vote, and there is no other lifeline. And so the same thing should be true in the case of, with 4 of us at the committee level. If it gets voted down 3-1, then that should be the end of it. And then just the last thing I want to say is that because we have a chair and a vice chair, I want to make sure that both of them are empowered to move things forward, and they do that together. That's how we work together.
Yeah. So I'm going to, if I may, before I'll get you to a second, is that you really summarized it well. I think there's emerging consensus, and I'm fine with the way Councilmember Valenzuela said it. If it's 2-2, there's nothing broken. It goes to the city council, and it's heard. And that is at least a signal to the staff to begin working on it, okay? The 3-1's obvious, 4-0 is obvious. It's the 1-3 and the 0-4. That's what we're still wrestling with a little bit. And here are the contending good arguments. On the one hand, Councilmember Valenzuela, I think, says it well, that, okay, let's say that there would be majority vote on the city council, but 3 members of the committee are against something. Well, that's not quite fair, because the committee would be stifling what the majority of the city council might want. On the other hand, if we are comparing this to the legislature again, that is exactly what happens. There may be majority support on the floor of the assembly, but if the Committee on the Judiciary says, you know, there aren't the votes, it doesn't move forward in this session. And here's what I'm concerned about, and it's up to the council, obviously. It's a balance between the will of the majority, always, but also doing what we set out to do at the beginning, not only to protect the staff, which is absolutely the first motivation, but also to discipline ourselves more. And as many of you said, to require that the member with a provocative idea, you know, get a second vote on the committee, or at least work it out, because Brown Act-wise, the member could talk to another member and say, hey, would you agree to this if I brought it forward this way, or if I made that amendment or this amendment? And so that's what, if we're really trying to strengthen the committees here institutionally, then by allowing the 1-3 to go to the full city council and then have it be overturned, we're kind of saying, well, the committees matter, but maybe not that much. And so that's the 2-2, you got me, because you're right. Nothing's broken. Let's get it right to the city. It's the 1-3 and the 0-4 that I'm not sure I'm there. So but that's Councilmember Valenzuela?
Yeah. So, I mean, I love to teach legislative process to students. Actually, it's one of my favorite goals, because I'm like, here's how the process is like designed to work, and then here's how it actually works, right? Because there's plenty of bills that gotten amended on the floor. There's plenty of bills that come back that the Rules Committee decides. So there is a process by which bills that die in committee still come forward to the full body that get approved. Some of the largest legislative victories we've had, arguably in the last decade, have come from those bills because they stalled in committee, different politics happened, and they brought them back, and they got the votes. So I think if I'm thinking back on the ordinances that have passed on this council with the 6-3 vote, that has also been significant policy that we have made. And so I'm uncomfortable with the idea that we let 6-3 die without any mechanism by which there could be reconsideration, because that flies in the face of best practices in other legislative bodies, and we're pointing that the legislature is one of those bodies. But like every body that I've ever worked with has always had some process by which somebody can say, okay, we're going to take a pulse check and see if we can bring this back and try it again, because things happen. And I just don't think, like I said, and I said it before and I'll repeat it again, I don't think a minority of the council, 3 members, 4 members, should be able to kill something if we think we have the votes elsewhere. Imagine a scenario where it's like Councilmember Laloy, Councilmember Talamantes, myself, Councilmember Vane, Councilmember Maple. Those 4 do not sit on law and ledge, and we all support something. And we have the votes to get it through, and it's something that we feel is super important. And then it just dies, and there's no path forward. How are our constituents represented that way? If we have a majority vote on the council, I just don't think that not having any process to bring it back once, I'm not saying bring it back again and again and again. I appreciate the limitation here that we should only do it so often, but there should be at least one go where we say, hey, we got the votes to hear this, let's do it. I don't understand from a democracy perspective why we wouldn't do that. That's just me saying that. But then the city manager said something that actually alarmed me a little bit more. And so I want to hone in on this, because part of why we want to refer to committees is because we want some of that hashing out to happen at the committee level. We don't need to hash out ordinance language on the dais in the middle of a 5 p.m. council meeting when we've got 200 residents here waiting to speak about something else, right? And so what you just said is like, no, we're not doing the staff reports at the committee level. We're going to wait till the committee votes on it, and then when it comes to council, then we'll work on it. That brings a whole nother level of concern into my mind, because I'm like, well, no, like, because I want the committees to be able to do that work. I want us at Law and Ledge to be able to say, hey, we're going to go back and forth on this. I mean, cannabis is a great example. I mean, we've had multiple hearings on this. It's gone back to Planning Commission. We've had some check-ins here. It's going back and forth. So I want to clarify that, because I also don't want us to grind to a halt, because I'm hearing what Councilmember Jennings and others are saying, which is we don't want this to take 500 days to get something good through. So if we're saying essentially we're going to have to do this twice, is how I'm imagining. Like we take an ordinance through, Law and Ledge says, yeah, we love this. It comes to council. Either we're we're doing the ordinance work at council, or the council's voting it up and down, and then we're going back through a process to develop the ordinance and implement what the council just said. And I just want to make sure this is super clear, because when you said there's no staff report at committee, because I agree with what Councilmember Vang was saying, which is, hey, you're already making the staff report at committee, so what time are we saving? And we basically said, no, we're not doing staff reports at committee anymore. And I'm like, well, then how are we supposed to do that work?
If we're going to do staff work at the committees, we may as well keep the current log, because we're back to square one. The whole point of this was trying to get consensus from the council on whether or not they want to hear an item. And so whether the vehicle is the log, the committee, or the full council, I think that's what we need to figure out here. And that's really what this is, the heart of the issue here.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Valenzuela, if I could offer some kind of clarification on past practice. And we've done it in budget too, but a lot in law and ledge, is we have taken items up preliminarily without any deep work. And that's made the direction to move forward. So I also don't, I agree with Councilmember Valenzuela that, that waiting to council is not, we're not saving any time there. But I do think that there is some preliminary staff work. And the city attorney mentioned it here. They're going to be engaged because they don't want to lead us down, a rabbit hole when something's unconstitutional. So I do think that the city manager and its team have to do some preliminary work at the presentation level. The onus, I think, should be, and maybe this is where I think the process in presenting something requires us to submit information. But we have done at the Law and Ledge Committee where we bring a concept up, and then there isn't any deep, staff work. The committee has then given the direction to staff that that's the next step we want to do.
I think we're saying the same thing.
I mean,
think that
That's at the committee level.
yeah, that's at the committee level. So, I mean, what the vice mayor just said is like, okay, we'll take cannabis lounges as another example of something that just happened like this, right? The Law and Legislation Committee didn't want to move forward. So I brought it back to council and said, hey, do we have an up-down vote on whether or not we want to consider this? And we said yes. And then the referral was back to Law and Ledge. It wasn't to come back as a council item. It was to go back to Law and Ledge. And so that was a reconsideration process that we just did with the log, and the majority of the council said, yes, we want to talk about cannabis consumption lounges, and now we're going back to Law and Ledge to work on that. So I think what we're all saying here is maybe there is an additional layer in the discussion about what gets on the log. Because I think the general premise here of have a more robust proposal, do more legwork, build that buy-in is fair. But what I'm also hearing is a whole lot more of our process to get something through, which bothers me because I don't see how that's saving the city any broad time, because now we're going to spend 6 months debating whether or not we should talk about something when really we could have been doing the work and taking the pulse check earlier on. So maybe it's a revision of this, Mayor, to be honest, because I hear what you're saying is like, well, we should maybe just stick with the log process and make it an up-down vote, like the vice mayor said, and not debate the content of these motions.
Can I try? Let me try that. Let me try this. So, first of all, okay, now I lost my train of thought for a minute. Oh, I have an idea about how we might reconcile this here. Well, first of all, when you're the committee can simply take a vote, a 2-2 vote under what we're talking about, without a lot of staff preparation, as somebody said, to say we want this issue to be worked on by the staff. That in and of itself is a signal. So you can do that without a lot of staff work. That'd be a good thing. But I want to get to the 1-3 because I'm thinking about how to reconcile your very important point of view about the rule of 5 here. So what if we did it this way? What if it was a 1-3 or 0-4 vote, and you got to then petition the council in a non-debatable motion whether or not it should be heard, and if you prevailed, you or anybody prevailed, it goes then back to the committee again.
Okay.
Because
Try to sum this up before you explain your reasoning more, because I think we're on the same page, and I
Okay,
don't
but-
want to lose
well-
this moment. So, okay.
And it goes back
so what
to the
we're-
committee.
Okay, so same initial
One
process,
time.
right? I have a proposal, cannabis lounges. Again, I submit a documented thing. It goes to Law and Ledge. Law and Ledge says either 2-2 or 3-1 or 4-0 in favor. We want to
Go.
talk about this. It stays at committee.
Yes.
So it doesn't come to council.
Well,
Because at that point, the
Okay.
committee has said, yes, we want to look at this. I know, and I'm adding an additional layer here. So it's like, and then the committee does its work, because I don't want to be amending ordinances on the dais in full council unless we need to, right? Like, unless there's a council member, but then there's that situation where there's a 1-3 or 0-4 vote to say, I don't want to talk about Katie's idea, forget it, right? I don't like it, I think it's crummy. And then at that point, there's a reconsideration process to say, well, I want to do an up-down vote for the rest of the council. And again, consumption lounges is one of those more recent examples. I didn't have the votes on law and ledge. I brought it to the full council. Full council said, yes, now law and ledge is going to work on that.
I think that's perfect, and I agree with that. I think it's the 2-2 that I'm stuck on. So if it's a 2-2 at committee, does it go to the council for an up and down vote before staff does the work, or does it get referred back
No,
to
because
committee?
now that's a 75%, that's a 50% vote of
That's
the
the
committee.
question,
Yeah, and that's our current practice. And so like I said, I don't think we've had any issues with ordinances, and I'm using law and ledge as an example because that's the committee I've been sitting on, saying 2-2 something, and then there's huge disagreement on the council. It's a good pulse check of the council. But I think, so essentially what we're saying is we're reserving the log, so we're keeping a form of the log, up, down vote, not content, just for items that have gone to committee and have failed.
That's right. Now, but let me
just-
let me follow through on it though. So if the council votes to hear an item that was defeated 1-3 or 0-4, it goes back to committee, right? And if the committee, after all the work is done, and the committee considers it again, and it's a 1-3 vote that second time, then it's, Dad, you said one shot at the reconsideration.
Yeah, that's a question.
That I could go with. I think that's fair. I mean, because that's multiple. That's multiple. Yeah, and I think, Howard, on yours, the 2-2, the signal, I think, is that we
Goes
start
back to-
working on it.
Goes back to the committee, yes.
For work.
For work.
Yeah, okay.
That's a move forward signal, 2-2.
Yeah, okay. So I think we might have something here. Okay?
Is, as a council want a proposal, we now have to put it in writing.
That's right.
Like, I want to make sure,
Summarize in writing.
because I think that's best
Okay.
practices.
Can I try to summarize what I heard here and see if this is, because I
Can I
think,
add a layer? Sorry, I'm sorry. This is why we're doing a public workshop. And so I just want to make sure it's like, so I write up a proposal, it goes to law and ledge says, yeah, we want to do this. That's when the commissions get brought in, right? So I guess what I'm saying too is like, well, maybe we don't bring in the commissions until the committees do that initial thumbs up, thumbs down. Or do you want to go to commissions before it goes to committee for a thumbs up,
Susanna?
thumbs down?
Well, I think that there's some things where your commissions have first jurisdiction because they inform
Planning
the
commission.
council. So it may not be appropriate for something to be debated at law and ledge when it's really something that the youth commission is supposed to be the advisory body to council.
Okay.
That doesn't mean council couldn't take the commission's recommendation and send it back down to committee to like, well, budget and audit, for example.
So we're still putting forward an idea, it goes to the appropriate commission.
Right.
And then it goes to the committee, and the committee's deciding whether or not they want to hear it. So it's almost like a log process that's now at the committee level.
Yes.
They say yes, staff works with the committee on that before it comes back to council. They say no, it goes on to a potential log that the council could decide, no, we really want to hear that.
I think there's one step there. There's a clearinghouse that's the clerk's office to hear all these proposals. And then from that log, we'd sit down and figure out which
committees to refer to.
refer to.
That's
Yeah,
that's the
piece.
manager. So the commission thing I agree with, because that we absolutely need to integrate our commission. But what happens if the commission is moving slowly, or they have, in other words, I think that it probably should read something like this, it has to be heard by the commission before it gets full consideration by the council. So it isn't too rigid in terms of the timing of moving the process forward. A little flexibility there, I think, would be helpful.
Should we put a timeline as well?
That's what the manager and the mayor are going to do in terms of the referral, okay?
Right, and depending on what the issue is,
With the chairs.
it could take longer. If it's an ordinance update that requires public outreach, it's going to draw that part out. If we're pretty sure everybody wants to go in the same direction, we could kind of truncate that a little bit, that whole process. So it depends on the issue.
Okay. So, Susanna, did you have any,
Well, just to confirm, because I think that is probably your answer, a two-step process at the committee level.
yes.
And then it's simple. And then you have other items that have been gotten the approval to move forward on your agenda. So
Right.
that's good.
Okay, Vice Mayor?
Yeah, no, Mr. Mayor, I think you've got a tough job to try to piece everything together
I think
here.
I can summarize it.
To summarize
I
it.
can do it.
And all I'm going to say is in your summarizing, and you may not hit every mark right, and maybe everyone's happy after your summary and whatnot, but I want to also give you the flexibility to, take this time to kind of, as we go out and do the research, what other cities have done, to be liberal in your way to bring in other concept as we move forward.
Thank you.
Even if you summarize now. And then I'll just close with that. I also, like Councilmember Jennings, I felt that there needs to be some level of finality to be able to give direction on what's not being worked on. I mean, we want to work on under the sun, so that's all.
I think, well, by the way, this is maybe to the public watching this, they go, what the heck, I mean, but I have to tell you, I think that this was a really good and healthy discussion because it is going to make our work on behalf of the public better going forward. Because it's just functionality. It's just, we're creating a more functional process that will be much better for the staff and better for the members too, with less chaos and dysfunction. So this is the way I've heard it, and I think it comes together nicely. Okay, let's take big idea one. Okay, it's written up by the member, comes through the member, to the city manager and the mayor, and we would be charged with working with the committee chairs to refer the matter to committee, working with the committee chair on timelines, and also referring to the appropriate commission as appropriate to ensure that their input is done in approximately a parallel time period as the committee. The committee looks at it first and makes a threshold decision, a vote, can be called a mini hearing, whether or not the committee wants the staff to put more time into it. A 2-2 vote, or a 3-1 vote or a 4-0 vote means that the staff begins working on it and the committee begins working on it in earnest. The committee then considers it. And remember, there are going to be timelines attached to this because we're trying to avoid the lengthy, the lengthy log period, which, by the way, is not the staff's problem. It's our fault. It's the members. We've looked in the mirror and we've seen ourselves here. I mean, that's what this is. The committee does its work. The committee then takes a substantive vote. 4-0, 3-1, 2-2. That moves forward to the city council with the staff already working on it, and the full council will consider it as regularly agendized. If it is a 1-3 or a 0-4 vote, it's not quite dead, may still have life. The member, sponsoring member, or any member can ask that it be taken before the full city council for a non-debatable motion per Vice Mayor Guerra to determine whether or not it should actually be reconsidered. If the vote is yes, 5 votes, it goes back to the committee. And by the way, for those on the committee who voted no, if it was 1-3 or 0-4, you might consider the input of your fellow members here and working it out with the sponsor to try to get something good done here. Because by the way, there's always a way around any rule, like you author a different ordinance and try to get it done a different way, right? So nothing's ever dead if you're persistent enough. But anyways, it goes back to the committee, and then if it dies on a 1-3 or 0-4, 2-2, it goes forward. A 1-3 or 0-4, then it's gone for the session. I think that's fair. Is that fair? I think that's true. Okay. Yes.
Okay. So, if I have an idea, and I'm not on Law and Ledge, sorry, Katie. Who gets to, and right now the council log does A, B, and C in terms of priority. Who gets to decide whether my idea will be heard, and when? Is that going to be you and the city manager?
And the manager, yes.
You two?
Yes.
And what would that time?
And we guarantee
You too.
and we guarantee that your idea will be heard.
Okay, so you guys will also do A, B, and C with all the requests that we get.
That's right.
Her chair.
We're going to try to be the initial triage, exactly.
Well, and I think what's important is, having served the last 2 years on Law and Ledge, is there have been times that we've moved something forward for council consideration for the sake of moving it forward for council consideration, right? So like I imagine, and what I think you're saying, Mayor, so I'm just repeating it out loud so we're all on clear, is like if this comes back for reconsideration and 5, 6 of the members are like, no, we want this, then our job as the committee is going to be to bring something back. You know, it's like we're not saying that we love this thing, we voted no, we made our opinions clear. Now we're working on bringing an ordinance or whatever it is back to meet the demands that the members have said we want. Not to be the roadblock, but to be the committee that works.
This is why we got to work
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
It's collegiate, but with some rules. Councilmember Jennings.
I'm sorry, just real quick. I'm in support of where we are right now. I guess we haven't talked about the question is if a committee is only a committee of 3, do the same rules apply moving forward? So a person doesn't show up for a meeting, there's only 3 there, and I just want us to start thinking about that because that now becomes a whole different mix.
Well, what's the answer to that, Madam City Attorney?
That's why we put the word majority, not 4.
Still needs 2.
Okay?
Needs
So it still
2.
needs 2.
It's the rule of 2. But remember, if you only get 1, you can still go to the council and get it re-referred back to committee, so you're not dead yet. Okay,
The majority of the members present.
got it.
Good.
Okay, I think we got it.
Just
Okay? Sean?
one question. So if it's at that 1-3 or 0-4, the council member that has that proposal gets an opportunity when it comes to the council for yay or nay.
Non-debatable. Non-debatable, but yes.
Non-debatable, but that council member gets an opportunity to just purely just give a presentation of what he thought, and then it's a yes or no. I mean, written down. I'm sorry, yeah.
Present, I don't know, does the sponsor get to make an argument, Mr. Vice Mayor?
I mean, my recommendation would be no, because the question is, should this item be heard?
No, you
period.
present, it's
not-
a written proposal. Yeah.
If that written proposal gets rejected at the water committee, and then it comes here for yay or nay, can that council member that presented that in writing modify it and then bring it to the council for yay or nay? Without a debate, just a yay or nay.
I think you've got to work with the committee chair who would have to be able to make the determination whether or not your amendment is significantly different, that it might make a difference with the committee. That's the way
So
the
the
committee
amendment
process
goes to the chair or the
Yeah,
vice chair?
that's right. We want to avoid as much council.
So what you're saying is like essentially the chair would have the authority to bring something back for reconsideration if the author of that said,
There's
here's
no
a substantial
question.
change.
You always do.
Yeah. Yeah, so like if
always do.
we voted down, Sean, I guess then, and you said, oh, I'm going to amend this and bring it back to you, then I, like Law and Ledge Chair would be able to say, okay, I'm going to agendize this and we'll vote it up and down just like we did the first time if we want to hear it, and if not.
Okay.
Make sure that the chair and the vice chair are working together, and there has to be a decision between the 2 of them to do whatever it is they decide.
Work with your vice chair, in other words.
Exactly.
Always work
I
with
think
your
that's
vice chair.
important.
So, okay, I know we're about out of time, but I'm going to throw out one more thing. I think we got the process down, but now I'm going to throw out one more thing because I still am sensitive to what Councilmember Maple said at the very beginning. And by the way, these committees are all going to change. Everyone's going to be a part of committees. I did the best I can. There were a lot of people who wanted, for example, RT. I had to make choices there. They're all, I do the best that I can, okay, imperfectly, and really invested in everybody's success, as I've talked about many times. But your point's well taken. So this is, if the Water Committee is no longer the most relevant committee, is there any interest in substituting a different committee, like given how important the issue of housing is? Would we want to have a housing committee? Because in that way, you could, then everybody would be represented on a committee that might have gained the jurisdiction. I don't know. I probably should have ended the conversation before that because we were all in agreement. But oh, I can't talk about that? Is that? No? Okay. Let's give this a try. Okay. 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 You know what? Quit while Quit. Okay, I'm done. This agenda is done.
Is it a particular format that we have to write or?
We'll bring that back. We'll bring that back. Okay. That it, members. That ends the. What we do? We do have one speaker. Go ahead, Mr. Evans.
So I have one speaker online, call-in user 1. Mr. Davis, and
Mr.
then
Davis.
Barry Boyd following him.
Yes. First of all, I want to say that as a person who attends a lot of meetings that pertain to City Hall, and I mean a lot of meetings, this was very enlightening to me because I was able to understand, which I already knew, that when something goes through the process of becoming agendized, it should be acknowledged. I mean, because there's a process that goes on with becoming agendized. There's many times I've been at City Hall where I was the last speaker and it was midnight, and what was on the agenda was acknowledged before I got to speak. And so because I've encountered those sort of processes, I think this year, something that's been on the agenda longer than the log, when I hear so many days, 500 days, whatever, something to me, and finally people are waking up, that's on this agenda. It's been on the agenda for years, and it's not being implemented or acknowledged. It's not going to be implemented at 2 o'clock, and it may not be implemented tonight. But somebody's responsible for that. I don't know if it's the city attorney. I don't know who it is. But I personally, because I've encountered many things in the city manager's office, I want to hear the city manager's report or else take it off the agenda. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker is Barry Boyd.
Thank you and good afternoon. I do want to echo the previous caller's statement in regards to this has been a very decent civics lesson, and hopefully there was a lot of attendees who now understand the process or closer to understanding the process of the workings of bringing an issue forward. But to that, I am still against what the summation of the what is now sitting at the table to go forward with, simply because, as with now and or tomorrow committees, if it's a committee whose ideology is contrary to the majority of the council, they can hold back and by vote any submission that they choose that's against their ideology. And to that, and or in the opposite of that, if they want to push something forward, then it would be up to just the mayor and or, as I understand it, either with or an additional opportunity of the city manager to bring forward to the council versus the current process where it isn't a one person or two person choice to bring an idea to the council. So I'd like the verbiage of Councilmember Valenzuela, who I believe she was the only one that brought forward the verbiage of a democracy. A democracy is the will of the people. All of you on that council are there because you are the representative of the will of the people that elected you to represent what the will of the people desire. So any constraints of the will of the people is never good in a democracy. When it's in the hands of one or two, is a dictatorship. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker is Kim Sao. Kim is our final speaker on this item.
Hi, my name's Kim So. I'm in District 5, and I'd also like to comment on that backlog agenda items. 500 days or longer, that I don't know. It doesn't sit with me well. What kind of items are on that list? And do we need to hear them as the public in our communities what these items are, and are they important items to us that need to be addressed is my main concern. Does the public have access to these backlog items? And I'd like to see you guys try to move through that a little quicker, because that is longer than 1 year, going on 2. So yeah, I'm just backing up that one caller who mentioned that because it was concerning to me. And thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Mayor, I have no more speakers on this item.
Okay, thank you very much, members of the public. Vice Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, in the meantime, while we figure out our final action on how we work things on the log and what the appropriate documentation, and my staff will work up some background on this, I'd like to direct our city manager, and in this case, I'll try to go in spirit with the proposal here, and the city in work in conjunction with the mayor and our clerk, to agendize the appropriate committee, either the Budget Audit Committee or Law and Legislation Committee, a conversation about our existing cell tower and residential cell tower funding. Historically, cell towers were positioned in many parts of our city. Some in in communities like South Sacramento, and the purpose of the agreement was that we would put those in those parks, and the revenue would be used for that local park, either George Sim or others throughout their city. But then what happened during tough budget times is all of the revenue was moved into the general fund and no longer to support those particular parks. And I think we need to honor those agreements, but I'd like to have that conversation about how we go back to honoring the agreements to those communities that had agreed to cell towers in their parks and in their areas so that the revenue can support those park activities. Thank you, Mr. City Manager, Mr. Mayor.
Excellent. Councilmember Maple.
I just wanted to say that as my very first meeting, and I think a few of us on the dais here, having a really open dialogue with my colleagues, and maybe not always agreeing on everything, but coming to a consensus and being able to move forward is really great. And it's really great for the public to be able to see this too, that we work together as a team, and that while we may have different viewpoints, I'm very excited to continue this work with you all. So I just wanted to say that.
Wait till we get to housing. Councilmember Laloie.
Well, Councilmember Maple, God bless you. I mean, I love that statement is pure gold. That we can actually agree and still be smiling and walking out. I hope when it comes to some of these other meetings where we're here for about 8 to 9 hours for this one topic, you can still be smiling and having that positive attitude. So,
All right, everyone. We do reconvene at 5 o'clock. So we'll see you at 5. We are adjourned. Thank you.